Welcome to Tuesday Live. I am Omini Udan. New opportunities and strategy in growing the nation's economy, particularly with the 2019 Finance Act that will, among other things, strengthen small and medium enterprises. How? You'll get to know in the second leg of the program tonight. The eco currency has dominated major international discourse with debates either for or against. The line of argument is based on derivable gains of the eco currency, especially for English-speaking countries of the ECOWAS sub-region that include Nigeria, West Africa's region's economic powerhouse that has put up stiff resistance to the ECO. These, many believe, might not be unconnected to accessions to gray areas in relation to the introduction of the ECO. Their held stance that the eco currency decision is more political than economic. Already, 8 West African countries, including Benin Republic, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Togo, had agreed to change the name of their common currency to the ECO, thereby effectively severing relations with the CFA francs links with former colonial master France. Last week, Thursday, ministers of finance and governors of the central banks of ECOWAS member states in the West African Monetary Zone had, at a meeting in Abuja, kicked against the renaming of the CFA to ECO. The launch is slated for July this year. How feasible? Tonight, our guest will sustain the discussion that is coming up on the heels of the UK-Africa Investment Summit ongoing in London, where President Muhammadu Buhari is driving home Nigeria's economic strides and potentials for investment. First, this background report put together by Chimaobi Walter Naji.
The discourse to float a single currency as a legal tender within the ECOWAS region has been on for more than 2 years. But beyond using the initiative as a form of regional integration, the eco currency, when approved, will not only facilitate trade and price stability among trading partners, but serve as a third force in the foreign exchange market to build a strong currency to compete favorably with other currencies in the world.
But as these achievements are exciting, the prospects for the currency future in 2020, viewed in terms of macroeconomic stability and convergence, is to say the least rather uncertain. This reasoning is predicated on the seemingly intractable challenge of member countries' failure to satisfy the convergence criteria.
Sometime in December 2019, the media space was greeted with news of the pronouncement by 8 member nations of the French-speaking part of ECOWAS on the adoption and subsequent change of their currency name from CFA francs to ECO by the year 2020. Now, this decision formed the basis of a discourse at this extraordinary meeting of the Ministers of Finance and the Governors of Central Banks of the West African Monetary Zone on the ECOWAS single currency program. Now, the meeting, among other things, condemned the action, stating that it is not in line with the decisions of the authority of heads of state and government of ECOWAS for the adoption of the ECO as the name of an independent single currency.
WAM's Convergence Council reiterates the importance for all ECOWAS member countries to adhere to the decisions of the ECOWAS authority heads of states and government towards the implementation of the revised roadmap of the ECOWAS single currency program.
The WAM's Convergence Council, in a communique, recommends that an extraordinary summit of the authority of heads of states and government of the WAM's member states be convened soon to discuss the matter and other related issues. In Abuja, I'm Chimaobi Walter Naji, NTA News.
This report sets the tone for the program tonight, but you get to meet my guest after a couple of reports that will be taken back to back, starting with Lagos.
The decision reached by some Franco countries under the aegis of West African Economic and Monetary Union to adopt a new common currency as against CFA this year did not all go well with the Anglophone countries, which Nigeria is a member. The need for the West African sub-region to urgently resolve issues bordering on convergence criteria, trade relations and economic integration, analysts emphasized, remains crucial to any other policy. Introducing policies that will foster trade liberalization and economic development of the regions, they say, is paramount to the adoption of a common currency.
Well, there is no reason on earth why France as a country, commanding the Francophone countries in West Africa, should be dictating terms to us as to how we should have a common currency within the West African sub-region. That should not be acceptable. Like I said, if Nigeria accounts for almost half of everything that matters within the West African sub-region, then why should an external party from somewhere dictate terms and conditions under which we should have economic cooperation, economic integration, common currency? That should not be acceptable to us.
They submitted that with Nigeria having over 40% of population and 50% of trade volume in GDP size in the West African region, the country cannot be turned into a dumping site. In Lagos, Abolade Salami, NTA News.
Next on the line of reports is the one from Maiduguri.
The idea of a common currency for the West African region was first mooted almost 30 years ago, with the hope of boosting cross-border trade and economic development, and the currency will be based on a flexible exchange rate regime coupled with a monetary policy framework focused on inflation targeting. The 6 member countries of the West African Monetary Zone, comprising Nigeria, Ghana, Gambia, Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone, have rejected the adoption of ECO as the name for the proposed single currency for West Africa, saying it is not in line with what was agreed for the adoption, which Nigeria accounts for 2/3 of the region's economy.
The problem with eco-currency is the Francophone states had already CFA. So now the CFA had already unilaterally accepted the ECO as their own, unilaterally without consulting Nigeria, Ghana, Sierra Leone, Liberia, and then Gambia. So in a situation where they unilaterally declared the utilization of ECO without consulting the English-speaking countries, it amounts to some sorts of breach of trusts in terms of agreement that we already had.
These experts say will be difficult for Chad, Niger, and other French-speaking countries to come to Nigeria and buy goods, as the ECO is going to be controlled by French and the monetary policy is determined by the European Central Bank.
If you do a single currency, the tendency is that the weaker economies within the ecosystem will be leaning very heavily on the big economies such as Nigeria, Ghana, and maybe Cote d'Ivoire. So these ones will impact negatively on our business and business people.
Others, on the other hand, are of the opinion that it is of advantage to Nigeria, as the country has diverse products that are locally in tune with West African sub-region, thereby operating cultured commercial venture, and its advantage will be based on factors of demand and supply of its products.
If Nigeria is staged within the midst of those West African countries, it is a very big advantage to Nigeria because we have the products. Therefore, we will attract most of the West African common currency towards Nigeria.
He further explained that if the ECO currency is adopted, there will be cost effectiveness as attendant extra currency exchange costs and risk will be eliminated. In Maiduguri, Yagum Subukar, NTA News.
Yet another one from Calabar.
The talk towards achieving a joint single currency across West Africa, the region's political and economic union agreed that the rollout will be gradual, with countries meeting the laid out criteria. However, an economist like Professor Agnes Antai of the rather than facilitate trade, slow down economic growth processes, especially that of Nigeria.
We may benefit from other countries that are producing cheaper than Nigeria, and things that we are producing more expensive, we can buy from them, and then they buy from us. So with the same currency. So that will lead to maybe some kind of development we may not gain too much because we are going to be negotiating.
However, the 6 member countries of the West African Monetary Zone, comprising Nigeria, Ghana, Gambia, Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone, have rejected the adoption of the ECO as the name of the proposed single currency for West Africa. What lies ahead in the coming days for an agreed single currency for all member states is one question that only time can tell. In Calabar, Achibombasi, NTA News.
The eco-currency is sustaining the conversation, and one of the guests there said, if Nigeria is caged, it will be an advantage to Nigeria because Nigeria remains a huge market. The program is Tuesday Live Tonight. You can be part of the conversation through our phone calls and our Twitter handles. Sending your tweets. At some point, the lines will be opened, and our Twitter handle is opened. The Twitter handle is Tuesday Live NTA. Well, we'll also be taking a couple of reports from across our zones, given our huge network and the biggest one in Africa. Well, my guest tonight, I have the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Public Affairs, Ajuri Ngelale. Good to have you on the program.
It's always a privilege to be here.
Director, Monetary Policy, Central Bank of Nigeria, Dr. Moses Tule. Welcome.
It's a pleasure.
Professor Ken Ife, Lead Consultant on Private Sector Development to the ECOWAS Commission. He is also Macroeconomic Policy Analyst. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Expert on Regional Economic Integration, Trade Lawyer, ECOWAS Consultant, and President, Nigerian National Association of Nigerian Traders. Good to welcome you to the program, Ken.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dominic.
And from our Lagos Network Center, we are the Director General, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Moda Yusuf. Good to have you on the program tonight.
Thank you very much, and good evening.
Thank you. Once again, gentlemen, welcome to Tuesday Live Tonight. Let me bend backwards a bit. What is the news is UK-Africa Investment Summit ongoing. How strategic is it?
Oh, well, thank you very much for that, Domini. This is extremely important on several levels. On the bilateral level, you have, and I want to focus in obviously on Nigeria and what it is that we stand to gain from this. When you look at the UK-Africa Investment Summit, it's difficult to talk about that without referring to Africa's economic giant, which is our country. And it's very clear from the immediate kind of outcomes of the investment summit. We have seen a series of deals signed in favor of our country, in favor of job creation, between President Muhammadu Buhari's administration and some investors from the United Kingdom. One of them is a deal with a UK-based company called Trilliant, which involves a multi-million-pound deal to supply smart metering to the Abuja Electricity Distribution Company. Obviously, that should have a major multiplying effect on the ability of that distribution company to ensure that we have fairly stable power output in the nation's capital. That's on the one end. On the other end, you have a £315 million agreement between a UK-based energy firm called Savannah Energy and in Nigeria that will see them acquire, again, about £315 million worth of assets in the oil and gas sector. That is at the first tranche. Obviously, that is going to lead to the upgrade of the facilities that are being purchased. We expect that to have some multiplying effect on revenue generation, obviously, in the oil and gas sector. And another one was another deal signed with a UK-based firm called Tex ATC, which is going to be a multi-million-pound agreement, which is going to see them build air traffic control towers across the country. These are just the immediate deals. I think what's really important and what I want our people to understand this evening is President Muhammadu Buhari is in this for the long haul. He's not just looking at the immediate dividends or the immediate deals. He's looking at how he can position the country to reap much larger dividends as we go down the road. And what I want to be very specific about in terms of how Mr. President is going about doing that is that in 2015, Mr. President was made the head of the Commonwealth Economic Investment Enterprise and Investment Council, EIC. Now, essentially, that council within the Commonwealth of Nations is tasked with encouraging intra-Commonwealth trade and investment. Now, what is important right now is that we are at a point in history when the United Kingdom, and Great Britain in particular, is obviously working out their exit now. They secured their deal to exit the European Union. Now, what that means is now the Commonwealth's largest economy is now free from the kind of economic ring fencing that has for a very long time been occurring, because when the United Kingdom was in the Eurozone and in agreement with the European Union, there were several tariffs across multiple sectors that would limit trade between the United Kingdom and countries that are not in the Eurozone. That is no longer going to be a factor, which means that you're going to have more bilateral agreements between the United Kingdom and countries like Nigeria. You're going to have more deals and more agreements between the United Kingdom and other Commonwealth countries. And Mr. President was very clear in his remarks that that council, the Enterprise and Investment Council, which he leads, is going to now have new vitality, a jolt of fresh life because of what is happening with Brexit. So we can expect a scenario in which Commonwealth nations such as Great Britain, Canada, and Australia are going to be more economically synergized with other Commonwealth countries. And then the last point I would like to make very quickly is that we all benefit from being states that have laws that align obviously under English jurisprudence, which means that we can more effectively align our regulations and our laws to effectively expedite and enhance trade and investment between the Commonwealth nations. So Mr. President is taking the lead on that amongst the Commonwealth nations, and that's a big reason why of all the African heads of state at the UK-Africa Investment Summit, it was President Muhammadu Buhari solely that was invited for a one-on-one meeting with Prince Charles as obviously a leader of the Commonwealth to work out some of these issues. So Mr. President's focused on the short term, the medium term, and the long term in terms of what is going to be an expansive trade and investment relationship between the United Kingdom and the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Okay. Dr. Tule, job creation, yes. More investments, yes. Economic growth, yes. And within the agricultural value chain, a lot of prospects. But some view this as one strategy to cage Nigeria once again. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I think we need to very clearly redefine the narrative here, which is that how strategic is this summit? The strategic importance of this summit is more in favor of the UK. UK is going to lose a big market in Europe, and it needs an alternative market. And the fact that there is a Commonwealth of Nations, which could become, perhaps in the future, some trading bloc, perhaps the world's biggest trading bloc it could be, if it graduates to that level. But then the UK suddenly remembers that it's got African nations there that were once colonies to the UK. So that gave them the impetus to pursue Brexit, knowing that without Britain's presence in Europe, Britain has a large market outside Europe. So first of all, it's a face-saving summit for the UK to tell you that, look, you guys, I'm back here. We can have a deal. And I think fortunately for the UK, where they left African nations to go and have a marriage with Europe several years ago, they came back and they still met those countries there, especially Nigeria. In terms of level of development, in terms of level of advancement, we haven't advanced much since they left us. I do not agree that it's kind of recolonization. We may not have a very strong basis for discussions or for negotiations with the UK, because when it comes to negotiations and striking deals, definitely they have the expertise better than we do. But certainly, in terms of developing some small industries, I'm not talking of high-tech industries. Of course, we can benefit, and then they can provide not just the market, but employment opportunities for British citizens outside the UK. So that's good for the UK. Now, to the extent that they're going to have some maybe £100 million investment, £200 million, £50 investment in some sectors here and there in certain countries, to that extent, you can say that those countries receiving those investments would benefit to the extent of that investment. But how large the UK is going to expose itself is going to be determined by the investment climate in most of the countries to where this investment is going to flow. And that is where we can then speak about Nigeria. What is Nigeria's investment climate? Is it so clement as to attract investment from the UK or from other countries, from Canada, from Australia? And that is what Nigeria has to work at. Look at investment climate between a couple of African countries. If you take Ghana, if you take Ethiopia, if you take Rwanda, if you take South Africa, certainly we can't match up to these countries in terms of the clemency of the investment climate that can attract investment to those countries. So we have to be really, really up and doing. And I think my friend has a lot of work to do in that regard. If you have the president's ears, then this is the time you need to really let the president know that we must, as a country, improve our investment. There are no two ways about it. Okay. If Nigeria is going to gain, we must work on that.
Okay, Prof, moving forward, give, take. People will expect it to be a win-lose drive, but we are looking towards a direction where we have a win-win drive. What's your take?
It has to be a win-win, and it is going to be a win-win.
Okay.
First, this is a unique opportunity for Nigeria. You remember Nigeria didn't sign EU Economic Partnership Agreement. We didn't sign it, and we have no apologies to offer for not signing it. By the way, it was more around trading goods. They haven't even started talking about the trading services. Mm-hmm. Then, even with the Africa AfCFTA we have signed, what is on the table is really about trading goods. When we now go into force, then we'll start talking about negotiating on trading services. But with UK, Nigeria has a very unique position, and we have something on the table. First, we have, in terms of trading goods, we have our oil, we have our gas, we have our mineral resources, and they have all the seismic drawings and 2 or 3D in London, because they were our colonial master. They have they know where everything is in Nigeria, all the mining minerals and all that. But if we can get comfort from a guaranteed deal on purchase of our oil and gas, that will give us some macroeconomic space. Because every day we are juggling with where we buy oil, where we sell oil and all that stuff. But if we can have, America let us down on the AGOA. They're no longer buying our oil. So it's very important for us that we can secure a deal there, and then we can have that breathing space. But on the other hand, London has the city. The city is one of the biggest financial markets in the world. And over $1 trillion of transactions are flying through the city every day. So all these are requests for, we have a long list of infrastructure that we need to finance. London can sort all that out for us. It's easy. They can sort it out. And they have more flexibility on what they could do when they have the guarantees that our sovereign guarantee, they could be much more flexible in what they could do with it. Now, so whilst on one hand, that is a win for them, for have their investments, but also a win for us to have the financing that we need for our infrastructure. And also, we have education. We have over 1 million Nigerians in London, more than the rest of Africa, sub-Saharan Africa put together. So we have the biggest population of black in there in London, which means it's a strategic asset for us. Don't forget that diaspora brings in $25–26 billion every year. And we have so much we can do when you look at national savings schemes and all of that, and how that money can diffuse into some of our financial markets. There is leverage. Even a mortgage market, there is leverage there. So we can talk about education. We are one of the biggest number of people trained in UK every day. We can talk about health, banks. We have some of our banks in UK. We have Nollywood. We have so many services areas. Aviation, all the services area will form the backbone of a comprehensive trade in services and trade in goods negotiation, solid negotiation. So I would say, and South Africa is heading in that direction. South Africa had a bilateral agreement with EU. We didn't, and we couldn't, because in 2003, we didn't opt out. We went into the negotiation. Now it's too late. We can't come out and say to EU, I already have one. We can't. So this is the thing. We just have to pursue the foreign policy that is saying Nigeria first. This is the first test case for Nigeria first. Go and sort a deal, cut a solid deal, and you can have that template to show to all these other continents that are coming to us. And we can make a good deal of it.
All right. Now, I'm happy that we have thrown it open. The SSC has talked about the government position. Dr. Tule has talked about the fears, and you have given us the picture where we can have it a win-win. Let's proceed. Ken, eco-currency, what is the status?
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sure you're going to permit me to perhaps draw a footnote.
Briefly.
In a brief manner. We had an EPA where UK was a member of Europe, and now it is no longer there. And here we are. There is no way that UK would not want to continue a trade relationship with with Africa. And the first point of call, where the market is, where the attraction is, where a good bride is Nigeria. Now, looking at that from that angle, what we must begin to look at right now is, one, to ensure that we come up to any kind of negotiation from a very strong background. And what is that position of strength? One, don't lose sight of the fact that United Kingdom is like an orphan, courtesy of Brexit. Now, orphan in quote. And therefore, it would want to have some more brothers and sisters. It wants to have some shares in the marketplace. Africa presents herself with 1.2 billion. So we need to get into that. Number two is that we need to also prepare ourselves towards that negotiation to ensure that we have all that it takes at home in terms of the environment, business environment, in terms of the capacity to even accept and consummate such investments. In terms of architecture, the framework, in terms of legislative and legal framework that will receive that, and in terms of security as well. In terms of policy, where is the trade policy? In terms of assurance that this investment will be secured and totally secured. And these are areas I feel. And then finally, in terms of the fact that the private sector government does not do business. Every negotiation is being done for the sake of the private sector. So therefore, you need to prepare the private sector who will consummate such implementation of the architecture. And that is very key. And I think we need to move. Now, taking off from...
Before you go to ECO,
yeah.
I want to go back to Dr. Tule. Apparently, maybe based on your views, Ken's views, and Jury's view, given the fears of his worry about capacity, Nigeria put on hold the issue of EPA on the grounds of violation of the World Trade Organization Treaty. I don't know whether he has a different view before we move on. Briefly.
Now, why Nigeria did not sign the Economic Partnership Agreement, it has turned out to be good for the country because we were not prepared and we did not even understand what it was all about. You'll recall that the EPA was a product of the EU, which they put together after the failure to convince the developing world in Mexico at the meeting in Cancun. They put together and sold on a piecemeal basis the EPA to countries, visiting them and selling them. In West Africa, all the countries signed except Nigeria and the Gambia. Now, 30 years down the line after signing the EPA, 80% of your trade has to be with the EU. Those were the terms in the EPA. Now, good enough, Nigeria, it simply meant that if you could import a product from any other country or from any other region of the world cheaper, 80% of your trade must be with the EU. Now it was good we didn't sign. And now it's kind of a saving grace for the rest of ECOWAS. And I still repeat, we need to put in place the enabling environment. Let me just touch briefly on what Prof just said about investment in oil.
But time is very tight.
Let me tell you, in the EU, there is total agreement by 2030. No vehicle in the EU is going to use fossil fuels. No vehicle in the EU. So 10 years to 2030, you don't expect the UK to go and invest heavily in oil. So we must be looking at the future beyond oil. We can't be talking of oil today. We must be looking at the future beyond oil.
Just a minute,
please, because I need to respond.
I'll come to you.
I need to respond.
You respond.
Thank
just
you.
Hold on. Right. Let's go to ECO now. You respond.
All right, thank you very much. Where do I start? The background is that meeting that held for almost a week in Conakry and then passed on to the council. And the council which met on the 20th looked at it and approved. And if you look at the contents of what the heads of states approved in their communique, paragraphs 13 to 18, which dealt with the ECO. One is the symbol of the ECO. Two is the creation of a central bank of West Africa that will be in charge. Three is the name, of course. And then four is that member countries should continue the process of negotiation and in fact put some fast-track actions towards the convergence criteria. And I think that was the last point in paragraph 18. Now, just on that day, about that day, you also discovered that President Alassane Ouattara of Ivory Coast, Côte d'Ivoire, who is also the chairman of UEMOA, the 8 member countries of, the Francophone in West Africa, side by side with Emmanuel Macron, President of France, sat down to announce that the Francophone ECOWAS countries, the Francophone West African countries, have adopted ECO, the same ECO, as a replacement for CFA, the France CFA. Now, there was some confusion. The next we had, just 2 days or so, was from Ghana, that came up with a press release saying that they support that move and in fact encouraged members member states to follow suit. Again, few weeks later, I mean, just about 3 days thereafter, we had Nigeria Minister of Finance now came up with a statement that Nigeria was studying the situation and would come out with its, her own position in due course. And then about a week or so later, had the meeting of the WAMS, the West African Monetary Zone, which met and then appeared to be kicking against the pronouncement and adoption of ECO, the same ECO that was adopted by ECOWAS by now the Francophone West African UEMOA countries. That's the situation now. And they are also imploring the heads of states, the ECOWAS heads of state, to meet over the matter for a clearer interpretation of their, their adoption, their pronouncement, and their resolution.
Okay,
so that
let me just hold you there so far.
Thank you.
Now, let's go to Lagos, where Muda Yusuf is waiting. Now, give and take. There is a paradigm shift within the ECOWAS African sub-region. Clearly, if all these grey areas are cleared, how ready is the Chamber of Commerce in Nigeria ready to fit in? Are you set?
Yeah, thank you very much. First, if you permit me, before I comment on the ECO currency, let me just briefly also comment on the issue of attracting foreign investment within the context of the UK African Summit. Let me say that the best way to attract investment into this country is to ensure that those who are already investors in this economy are doing well. In other words, charity must begin at home. That is why I want to support the idea of Tule, that we need to focus very seriously and more importantly on the issue of the investment climate. I mean, if you are talking about trade and things like that, trade is a two-way thing. It's about import, it's also about export. One of the panelists have talked about the fact that Nigeria is a large market and therefore is very attractive. But it's not just about providing a market for people to bring in goods here. It's also about putting something on the table in the global market. The percentage of our foreign exchange earnings now from oil and gas is almost over 90%. The non-oil sector is accounting for less than 10% of our exports. And it is in the non-oil sector that you can build an economy that is inclusive, that can actually impact the lives of the people. So I want us to get our priorities right. It is business people that do business. It is not the government. So, and it is what the business people see on the ground. That is what we bring them to come and invest here. So having said that, let me go to the issue of the ECO currency. The whole idea of the ECO currency is to ensure that we improve on the payment system. And I must say that the payment system and the common currency issue is the least of our problem as far as economic integration is concerned. The greatest problem to economic integration as we speak is the problem of what you call the non-tariff barriers. You need to speak to investors who are trading across the sub-region. It's a nightmare taking goods across the sub-region because of issues of the multiple agencies, issues of extortion, issues of all sorts of fees, and all of that. So there's still a whole lot of problems that we need to deal with. There's also the problem of the connectivity. You can't trade if you are not properly connected, either in terms of roads, in terms of the rail system, or in terms of the sea. That connectivity is not there. Then there's also the issue of compliance, even with the current levels of protocols that we have in ECOWAS. It is the compliance problem that led to the closure of the border. We have protocols that we have signed. The level of compliance is very weak across the entire sub-region. So we have to sequence and know what our priorities should be as far as economic integration is concerned. The issue of the monetary union is about the first level of economic integration. We have the free trade area, which is the first level, and the main anchor of this is the ETLS. We have the customs union, which is the next level, and we have the common market, which follows that. Then we talk about the monetary union. We have not been able to perfect or even improve properly the first three stages of economic integration. We are talking about a common currency. So for me, we need to get our priorities right. We need to fix the challenges of the lower levels of economic integration. I'm talking about the free trade area, the customs union, the common market, and we also need to address the issue of security. These are more fundamental issues than the issue of the ECO. The ECO is the least of our problem. Payment system, because of the sophistication in the financial system, payment system is not so much a big issue. You can sit in your bedroom and do transactions in any currency around the world with the kind of financial system and the globalization around financial markets that we have now. So that is my view. As for the readiness of the chamber, of course we are ready, but the environment has to be right before you can get businesses to key in into whatever opportunities exist in the area of economic integration.
Okay, before I come to a jury, let me take on Professor Kenefi. But before now, our focus on the first leg tonight is on the ECO currency sustaining the conversation. The phone lines will be displayed. Our Twitter handle is open. In a couple of minutes, we'll take tweets sent in by our viewers across the world. Now, given the argument put out by Moda from Lagos, coming back to back Mr. President Muhammadu Buhari's fears years back before ECO was endorsed, he said there is no need being in a hurry over ECO. But that is aside. With the issues raised now, are you saying we should relapse or continue?
There are two sides to it.
Absolutely.
It depends on the state of readiness and when we think the conditions are right. But if you don't think the conditions are right, it will be suicide for us to jump in. The reason is, first of all, in the last meeting, issues were raised about other convergence criteria, which is how much, if this is about trade, this currency is about trade, how much of the trade is going on now? Because we seem to be on a receiving end, where Nigeria is complaining that what we are getting is restriction of our goods going across, and then you have dumping of goods in our country. You have, smuggling and a lot of trafficking in drugs and all that, and all of them have repercussion for the intensification of the criminal crisis we have in all the geopolitical zones. And then, of course, there's the second political condition, that if you don't have peace, you can have trade, you can have development. So let's address this issue of cross-border conflict and all this whole terrorism, cross-border terrorism, if you really know that we want to. But we have been working on this because, to some extent, I sympathize with the Francophones, because they've been in the wings waiting for this 2020, and it will be unfair for us to walk away from. They are celebrating a major step in their economic independence. They've been waiting for this 2020 for them to begin to gain back control of their economy. So you can't say to them whatever it is that they did to achieve that, you shouldn't bother about that. We on the WAMSI zone, we have been sleeping on the timetable. 2003, it didn't happen. In 2005, it didn't happen. 2010, it didn't happen. 2014, it didn't happen. And you want to put it again from 2020. So I'm not saying that we should abandon that. There's no substitute. We have to meet the macroeconomic convergence criteria for us to actually take that risk. And the Nigerians' position must be very, very clear. Our position has to be clear because we are the biggest economy, we have the biggest reserve, we have the biggest to lose.
Okay, let me just follow
it.
Our first caller tonight.
Conditions are right.
Okay, our first caller tonight is calling in from Owerri, Imo State. Divine. Abia State, I beg your pardon. Hello, Divine. We lost that call. But on Dr. Tule, a couple of tweets have come in. Titus Baba says eco-currency is a scam. Deep thought needed. What is the advantage and disadvantage of the eco-common currency on our economy? Can you react to that?
Yeah, thank you very much. Eco-currency is not a scam. Let me explain. The journey started in 1975 with the adoption of the ECOWAS EMCP, ECOWAS Monetary Cooperation Program. In year 2000, President Obasanjo in Lomé called a meeting of the English-speaking countries plus Guinea, which eventually they formed the WAMZ zone, West African Monetary Zone, which was referred to as the second West African Monetary Zone. The expectation was that by 2003, the English-speaking countries plus Guinea would have a common currency to join together with the UMOA countries at a later date. Now, that did not happen in 2003. The date was shifted to 2005. Again, this group of countries failed to achieve convergence and meet. 2010 they did. In 2015 they did not. Then the ECOWAS heads of state then agreed that, look, since the WAMZ countries have not been able to achieve macroeconomic convergence and achieve a common currency, then let us by 2000, let us merge the two-track approach of the WAMZ countries having a currency and merging with the UMR countries at a later date into a single program. And then they initiated the Presidential Task Force Initiative under the leadership of the President of Niger, President Yusufu, and the President of Ghana, to lead the process. Now, in the process, in the course of negotiations and discussions, Nigeria put on the table solid issues which the ECOWAS countries ignored. They didn't take them into account. We pulled out of that process. Because we pulled out of that process, the fact the entire process was going to be in jeopardy, then they brought in Nigeria and Côte d'Ivoire to be co-members of the Presidential Task Force, meaning 4 people now. Then we were forced to begin to attend the meetings. The position we have adopted ever since we came on board remains the same. The same position we had put on the table is the same position we are putting on the table now. That unless you meet the convergence criteria, you cannot have a common currency. What are the convergence criteria? There were 6 in number. But they say, okay, look, there are too many. Reduce them. We reduce the primary criteria to 4 and the secondary criteria to 4.
6.
That is, we downgraded them. We downgraded them. And even after downgrading them, none of the countries has been able to meet on a consistent basis all the criteria. In December 2015, the ECOWAS heads of state met and passed resolution. They passed the revised amendment, an act of the ECOWAS heads of state summit that for the 2020 deadline, all countries that must meet the convergence criteria must meet it on a consistent basis, back to back, over a 3-year period, up to December 2019, which means for any country to become a member of the ECO, you must have complied with all the convergence criteria consistently. We had agreed already on what is the nature of the central bank, and we agreed it was going to be a federal structure of the central bank. We agreed on the monetary policy framework, which was going to be anchored by a flexible exchange rate.
Okay.
We agreed.
Sorry, please. We are quite loaded. You will land. We have a couple of reports just to sustain the conversation, like we said. We have reports coming in from Enugu, Aba, Katsina, Kano. Let's just take them, then we'll continue the conversation, please.
Of French colonial currency, the CFA franc, the West African Economic and Monetary Union were hoping to see a new common currency, the ECO currency, in place. The Anglophone ECOWAS nations of Nigeria, Ghana, Gambia, Liberia, and Sierra Leone, along with Guinea, comprising the West African Monetary Zone, met in Abuja for crunch talks over the adoption of the eco-currency and issued a communique condemning the decision to unilaterally rename the CFA franc. Some respondents in Enugu were, however, of the view that if actually in the original spirit the eco-currency was conceptualized without the recent underspinning from France, it would have indeed boosted the economy of the West African sub-region and facilitate trade.
Generally speaking, the idea is good. It's meant to promote trade and economic relationship and to deepen that within West African countries.
If we have a common currency, it will make trade very easy. It will strengthen the economy of West Africa, and that currency can now gain more ground in the international market.
They were, however, of the view that Nigeria adopting the eco-currency at this time would result to the devaluation of Naira, whittling of the economy, and would make the Central Bank of Nigeria to lose the power to adjust the interest rates.
If we sign into ECO the way it is today, it will ruin our economy. It would devalue the Naira. It will reduce the potency of our productive level.
It is, however, the views of many that Nigeria should not give up its national currency, the Naira, as it is often seen as the likely anchor currency for ECOWAS.
Financial experts are of the opinion that the discussion on eco-currency should be sustained and there should be more inclusion of technocrats and other key players of various business communities in the country for the discussion to have meaningful and fruitful import, as they observe that as population determines consumption, Nigeria provides a ready market in the sub-region, hence the need to negotiate from the point of strength by dwelling on those factors that may slow down businesses and other investment policies.
It's something that will create fears in the minds of traders. How do you exchange this eco-currency to your own local currency? For instance, you are coming from Cameroon to buy goods in Aba. I must tell you.
It's the proposed name for the common currency that the West African Monetary Zone plans to introduce in the framework of Economic Community of the West African States. However, on January 16, the year 2020, Nigeria and other West African countries, notably the English-speaking ones, denounced the decision to replace CFA by the ECO, saying that it was not in conformity with the program recently adopted by the entire region to establish a single currency. This followed an announcement by the Ivorian President Alassane Ouattara that sometimes this year, West African CFA used in former French colonies would be replaced with a new currency called ECO. However, with the attached criteria to be fulfilled by the member countries for the establishment of ECO currency, economists in Katsina said if implemented, it will affect business activities and slow down its development in the sub-region.
Do you think France will be ready to allow 50% of the foreign reserves of 8 countries in West Africa to be withdrawn?
The unfortunate circumstance was behind the French-speaking countries. They felt ECO, the tag name of the currency should be changed to ECO, which actually shows the pragmatic nature of Africa.
They expressed fear that the implementation of ECO currency will affect exchange rate, reduce economic well-being of the member state due to uncertainty, as well as a fall in macroeconomic stability.
Any place you want to go, you can use our currency and go there and do your business.
Kano, as commercial nerve center of West Africa, stands better chance of benefiting from the single currency. Records available show that between 50 and 100 people from the Niger Republic and Cameroon transact various businesses daily in the state. Therefore, Kano will serve as a melting point for the integration of the economy of West Africa. These can be achieved with greater commitment by Nigeria and her Francophone-speaking neighbors.
It is a very good initiative. It will ease trade. One of the barriers of trade is difference in currency. So at least in this era when the federal government is trying to promote intra-African trade, the main problem we had was all the countries in Africa were aiming to trade with Europe, with America, with Asia, and so on and so forth. The trade among African countries, they said, is less than 20%.
The common currency issue, special benefit is you are saved the cost of exchange rates and the sudden fluctuations. You are going to be saved. As long as you have the same currency, it is the same currency.
Other issue raised by stakeholders is that member states should be left alone to handle the currency, without interference by the Anglophone. Muhammad Rabiu Ali, NTA News.
A report from Kano links us to the Vox Pop by Nigerians. Tuesday Live is an audience participatory program. Let's take a listen to Nigerians.
I know it's basically for Francophone countries, which Nigeria is not part of. But I also heard that it's going to affect most West African countries. So in that case, Nigeria could be a part of it. But I've not really studied the economics behind it.
I believe Nigeria being a part of ECOWAS should not be exempted from this ECO currency thing, because when we talk about ECOWAS, Nigeria is part of it. So we should also join the other ones, in spite of the fact that we are not colonized by France.
To me, I think it's ECO currency, well and fine. It's good because economically to unify the sub-region of West Africa. But where I have my own problem is that we should make sure that the integrity of our Naira is maintained. Because if we're not talking of, if we talk of ECO, currency of ECO, which should be used by all, West African countries. The question now is this: will it take care of all the peculiarities of the states? To me, it's okay because it will actually facilitate commerce, it will facilitate economic activities and things of this nature. We should make sure that.
Reactions there by Nigerians, a lot of questions, concerns, and, well, mind-boggling issues. Technocrats to be involved, inflationary issues, integrity of the Naira. Well, Ajuri, let's hear from you. I've kept you silent for too long.
Thank you very much, Omini. I just want to respond to a few issues that have come up over the course of the conversation before I just get into the ECO matter. I think one of the first contributions in response was to the effect that, has Nigeria effectively created the kind of investment climate that can take advantage of bilateral and multilateral opportunities that could arise, such as the UK African Investment Summit? The response is this. I think any unbiased observer who has been watching what has been transpiring in this country over the last 4 years would acknowledge that for the first time in our history, we have been named to the World Bank top 10 most improving nations in the global ease of doing business rankings, and not just once but twice in the last 4 years. We've moved up approximately 40 spots. It's not just some random ranking or a random placement of Nigeria on that list. It is as a result of very tangible and verifiable adjustments that have been made across branches of government, from the executive to the legislature to the judiciary. And I want to be very precise about what I'm talking about. In the executive branch, we've seen adjustments made within, for example, the Corporate Affairs Commission, which has seen business registration times drop from approximately between 90 and 180 days down to now less than 48 hours in many cases, because of the online the automation of processes, because of the linkages now that were created online between the Federal Inland Revenue Service and the Corporate Affairs Commission. That's just on the executive side, and that's not even getting into port reforms and customs automation as well that has keyed into that process. In the legislature, it was in 2017 that this administration oversaw the passage of the Credit Reporting Act and the Asset Registry Act, which essentially has now given insight for business transactors to be able to see what the credit ratings of certain actors within the transaction space is for the first time in our history. The Collateral Registry Act has now allowed for movable assets to be placed in some of the transactions that take place as a form of collateral. These are things that increase confidence in the trade space within the country, in the commercial space. In the judiciary, we have seen tangible reforms in high courts in Kano and Lagos, the two commercial capitals of the country, that has basically seen start to finish times of small claims courts litigation reduced from 6 months down to beneath 60 days as a result of new guidelines that have been put in place by chief judges in those two jurisdictions. These are verifiable, tangible steps that have been taken over the last 4 years that has seen our improvement in the ease of business. Now, that has to do with investment climate. I think if you look at the tangible numbers, look at the financials, and what you're going to see is even in the midst of depressed oil prices, we have seen capital importation, and not just hot money, not just portfolio investment. We're talking about real capital importation of about over, I think, $20 billion in the last year, for example, well over that figure.
Let's go straight to the ECO. We don't have all the time right now.
We're excited about the progress. I just need to make one more point before I go into the ECO. My friend Muda
time is an issue.
Yes, I know, made the suggestion that, obviously that oil and gas exports make up over 90% of our exports, etc. Now, on the face of it, that would appear as if we're not making progress. And that's why I want to be very clear in responding to my good friend so that our people are not deceived about the fact that before you are able to enhance your exports, right, across sectors, across value chains and goods, you first have to do what? You have to satisfy local demand. We have gone from a situation over decades now where we're importing billions of dollars of goods, food items, you name it, across value chains. We have reduced those import volumes by 85 and 95% over the last 4 years, saving our country well over $25 billion in food products alone. That means that we have gone a ways to satisfy local demand, which will eventually lead us to the kind of export figures we're talking about. So let's be real about the fact that there has been tremendous progress in that regard. Now, to the issue of the ECO, it's very important that we break this down. I think we have been talking at a very top level, sophisticated level, in a way that our people may not grasp if they don't fully understand what the issues are. You essentially have two sides of the divide. You have the West African Economic Monetary Union, which is essentially a grouping of the Francophone countries, right, in conjunction with the French government. And then you have the West African Monetary Institute, or the West African Monetary Zone. Now, the West African Monetary Institute, WAMI, made very clear the criteria for convergence of the West African states to all adopt the ECO, right? We've touched on that a little bit. 4 primary criteria, 6 secondary criteria. Some of the criteria, because none of them have been specified in this conversation, include, and this is why Nigeria has been reluctant to just jump in head first like some of the other countries, include things like there must be single-digit inflation within all member states of the WAMI by the end of each financial year. You have conditions like you must have up to 20% tax to GDP. That means tax revenues are at least 20% of GDP. Right now, Nigeria is barely pushing 6%. Even it's only in like South Africa where you have about 29%. Kenya, I believe, is about 18%, etc. So West African states have a long way to go to get to that threshold. Now, the issues of convergence have to do with more than just payment systems. If you converge, what you're essentially doing is you have to now
just tie up.
Yes, very quickly. Yeah, I know. You have to put in legal statutes that would essentially create a brand new central bank, right? Not only will you have a brand new central bank governor, which would oversee this kind of federated system of the ECO, but you would also now need to harmonize all fiscal and monetary regulations and laws between all of the states. We have not come close to that, which means that 2020 is obviously not a viable and feasible time frame. The last point very quickly is that as we move forward, if we are able to federate it and establish the new central bank and go through all of these processes, the question now remains, is every country committed, every country within the West African Monetary Zone, is every country equally committed to ensuring that they are able to achieve the kind of macroeconomic stability within their countries? Are they going to be able to ensure good governance? Are they going to be able to ensure that they spend on infrastructure? Yeah. These are the kinds of issues, because Nigeria is doing it, but not everybody has President Muhammadu Buhari as president.
Thank you so much. Well, we have so little time for this issue. We have 2 issues tonight, so as much as time allows, we'll take as much as possible. We need to go to Lagos now to take on Muda for concluding thoughts on this issue before we sign on the next issue. What's your concluding thoughts, please?
Well, my concluding thoughts is that we should not be in a hurry to jump into this. This whole discussion about the ECO, as far as I'm concerned, is a distraction. We should deal with the fundamental issues which I've highlighted earlier, which are the key issues that are impeding or constraining trade within the sub-region. So let's get our priorities right, and let's see whatever we can do to ensure that we build a competitive economy. If you have an economy that is competitive, that is strong, the issue of common currency will not matter. If we take the example of the EU, there are quite a number, close to 10 countries in the EU are not in the Eurozone. They are members of the EU, but they are not part of the Euro. I mean, we have countries like UK, we have Sweden, Hungary, Croatia, Bulgaria, and quite a number, and Denmark. They are not doing badly, in spite of the fact they are outside the Euro. And if you look at even economies that are doing very well in terms of trade, take China, for instance, take Japan, take South Korea, quite a number of countries like that, they are not part of any monetary union. So for me, this is a distraction. We should spend less time on it and focus more on the issue of the economy. And I must say that the investment climate is still very challenging. Irrespective of what the World Bank is saying, we still have serious issues with productivity, we have serious issues with power, with roads, with our ports, with regulation, with policies. Let us constantly engage the stakeholders in this economy so that we can fine-tune this. Let us fix our economy and make it a lot more competitive. That is my closing thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Muda Yusuf, Director General, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. It was nice to have you on the program as I sign you off at this time. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And back when we return for the second leg of the program, we shall be signing off Dr. Moses Tule, Director of Monetary Policy, Central Bank of Nigeria. Thank you so much for making it on Tuesday Live tonight. We know we didn't give you all the time to exhaust your issues, but we believe on that leg we shall do that. Thank you so much. When we return on the second leg of the program, we shall be looking at the impact of the 2019 Finance Act recently signed by Mr. President. Stay with us.
These days, people get their news and information from more media sources than ever before. Some of the news and information given are fake, unverified, doctored, and manufactured to create confusion, stir disaffection, and cause disunity. Before you believe or share any news, ask yourself, is this real? Is it from a credible source? Is it verified or verifiable? Fake news is dangerous, whether you do it for fun or for political gains. Real people can get hurt. Fake news, don't create it, don't spread it.
This is a public service announcement from NTA.
You can follow us on all our social media platforms: Facebook at NTA Network News, Instagram at NTA Network, Twitter at NTA News Now, YouTube at NTA News Online, or visit www.nta.ng. For live streaming, visit www.nta.ng/live. Now, you can stay updated on the go, be it on your TV, iPhone, laptop, or iPad, or download the NTA mobile application from your Play Store or App Store. NTA, you can beat the rich.
Tuesday Live, a network issue-oriented innovation talk show.
Thanks so much for staying tuned. And on the second leg of the program, we'll be looking at the impact of the 2019 Finance Act On the 13th of January this year, President Muhammadu Buhari signed into law the 2019 Finance Act. Developments applauded in many quarters, given the derivative gains as it entails to other things promote fiscal equity, support small and medium enterprises, and reform domestic tax laws, aligning with global best practices. Small businesses with turnover less than 25 million naira to be exempted from companies' income tax. Furthermore, if a business makes between 25 million naira and 100 million naira in sales in a year, 20% company income tax will be paid instead of the usual 30%. We take this background report put together by Chimobi Walter Naji before we sustain the conversation.
The signing of the finance bill by President Muhammadu Buhari to make it a law was greeted with lots of accolades from experts who believe the provisions of the act is geared towards ensuring continued stability and protection of micro, small and medium enterprises in the country. The exemption of micro, small and medium enterprises with capital base of less than 25 million naira, they say, is a sure way to open up the informal sector and ensure incentives are given to encourage startups to grow from small to bigger businesses before being captured into the tax net.
Impose that company income tax on every entrepreneur, regardless of their profit margin, then the tax becomes regressive. But as this administration has rightly done, they've separated the taxable companies by earnings, those above 25 million and those below 25 million.
If you don't have an annual turnover of up to 25 million, you are exempted from registering and charging VAT. It doesn't totally remove you from VAT obligations, because when you are paying for services, goods or services, for those who have a turnover beyond that, you still have to pay if you're that SME that has that turnover below 25 million. So it doesn't entirely remove the burden, but it just lessens it.
How sustainable is this policy considering the vulnerable nature of the informal sector, and how can this policy be improved upon to ensure proper implementation?
If the government create an enabling environment for small businesses to be done, we need to encourage a lot of industry.
This our reform also needs to be backed up or followed by a very clear database on small-scale businesses, medium and large. What they earn, who should pay, when to pay, how long will a small business stay before it starts paying taxes? How long will a medium-scale business stay before you classify it as large? All these rules need to be very clear.
As laudable as the Finance Act may be, some other respondents believe there are some concerns and challenges and the need for government to go beyond paper tax reform, especially with company income tax and value-added tax. In Abuja, I'm Chimobi Walter Naji.
Walter Naji's background on the impact of the 2019 Finance Act set the tone for the second leg of the program tonight. On set, I still have the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Public Affairs, Ajuri Ngalale, and also Professor Kenny Fay, Lead Consultant on Private Sector Development to the ECOWAS Commission. He's also a Microeconomic Policy Analyst. Thanks for staying on. Ken Okowa is still with us. He's expert on regional economic integration, trade lawyer, and ECOWAS consultant. Thanks for staying on. And just joining us on the second leg of the program is Tefa Abraham, investment and financial expert. Thanks for joining us afresh on the program.
Thank you very much.
Quickly, let me allow a jury to give us a brief perspective as much as the reports have set the tone.
Thank you very much. Yes, Omini. The finance bill is the result of very wide consultation, and obviously the details have been out for some time, increasingly so as time has gone on, laid out by President Muhammadu Buhari during the laying of the 2020 appropriation bill last October. Now, I think what is of most priority to our people is going to be about how this financial bill, which was signed into effect on January 13th, is going to affect their lives. We know that within this bill, the value-added tax has been increased from 5% to 7.5%. We also know that as a result of President Muhammadu Buhari's concern for the most vulnerable segments of our population, he included a wide kind of segment of exemptions that would be put in place to protect most Nigerians from the effects of the VAT increase. Obviously, that would include new items that are, all fruits and vegetables, all meats, you name it, rice, wheat, cereals, even locally manufactured sanitary pads to encourage local production, for example, and it goes down the line. Almost every staple food item that most of our families consume on a daily basis have been put in that on that list to protect our people. Now, in terms of business, because this administration has put so much work, I know I just talked about the ease of doing business and some of those efforts, we put in so much work to try and encourage the development of micro, small, and medium-scale enterprises, and we don't want to reverse that now with any kind of undue tax regime. So what has been put in place is a new threshold that would ensure that every micro and small enterprise that is achieving or turning over an annual profit of 20 million naira or 25 million naira or less will not pay company income tax, CIT. They will be exempted also from VAT as well. Now, the medium-scale enterprises, which are enterprises that turn over between 25 million naira and 100 million naira, would see the rate of company income tax that they were paying before be cut. So most, when you talk about micro and small and now medium enterprises as well, you're talking about over 90% of the enterprises in the country. And you're going to now see for the medium enterprises a reduction in CIT from 30% down to 20%. Now, in terms of the large enterprises, those enterprises that are turning over an annual profit margin of 100 million naira or more, they are now going to just continue, instead of increasing, they're just going to continue paying 30% company income tax. But I think what is most exciting and really what has not gotten a lot of press lately is the fact that a new clause was put in place by President Muhammadu Buhari, which essentially says that no matter the size of your enterprise, small, micro, medium, or large, if you are involved in any aspect of agricultural production across any value chain in the agricultural production sector, you have an opportunity to take advantage of a new clause that would essentially exempt you from payment of company income tax for a period of 5 years. We are so determined to diversify this economy and produce what we're eating and also export that we are putting that in place to encourage agricultural production. And also, not only are we giving a 5-year exemption of CIT for any size enterprise involved in agricultural production, we're also ready to renew that by an additional 3 years once it's been proven that you have continued to participate effectively and fully in the agricultural production space. The last thing I would just mention is we understand that tax compliance is a very, very important aspect of sustainable economic growth and development, and ensuring that we're able to shore up the kind of internal revenue generation that will enable us to fund our budgets in the future without borrowing. So what we've done in terms of tax compliance within the finance bill has been to put in a new stipulation, a new bonus stipulation, which basically says that any enterprise, if you're, for example, a medium-scale enterprise and you're paying 20% CIT as opposed to 30% before, that if you pay your taxes, you remit what is due to the tax authorities within 90 days before it's due, we're ready to give a 2% bonus in CIT reduction just to encourage early tax payment, early tax compliance. Now, if you're a large enterprise turning over 100 million naira in profit or more every year, then we're willing to give a 1% bonus in CIT reduction for early tax payment as at when due within 90 days. So these are all the new innovative measures that Mr. President has put in place to ensure that not only are our businesses now having a kind of level of predictability that they didn't have before in terms of the business environment, investment environment, but now we're also incentivizing the process of tax compliance and tax payment. And we think that that's going to pay dividends moving forward as we restructure our economy towards internal revenue generation integration as opposed to singular oil and gas import-export business.
Okay, before I go to Tefa and Ken Okoha, let me take on Professor Kenefe. Let's also look again at the strategic objectives of the Act that include raising government revenue through various fiscal measures, promoting fiscal equity by mitigating instances of regressive taxation, and introducing incentives for investments. Beautiful. What if the safeguards are not properly put in place? What happens?
There are safeguards, and in fact, I have to tell you that there are more gains in terms of tax, not just from the VAT, but for the rejigging, all the changes that have in the petroleum tax laws. A lot of money is coming out from there. I know you expect between $500 to $800 million this year, but next year and subsequent years it will be well over $1.5 billion. But two things that hit me on this. One is corporate group headquarters of companies have been shying away from Nigeria for a very long time. And it's because of double taxation. Now they've removed that. The practice has been they go to Dubai and other low tax constituencies and put their group headquarters there. And they do transfer pricing. Africa loses $84 billion on transfer pricing, Nigeria over $8 billion. And what it means is that oil companies or big companies, multinationals, they will invoice their head office, high group office somewhere, and then they manipulate the price of their import and export from Nigeria to transfer the value or to their offshore company. But now these companies are now free to come here and they will make money. And there's a difference. When you are on one business, you are also looking around and seeing other businesses. Siemens was doing more of telecommunication, now they're in power. And then, the more you look, the more you see. So opportunities. Then the second one is the impact, the economic impact on small businesses. When you set a benchmark, people rotate around that benchmark. There are about 42 million SMEs in Nigeria, accounting for about 90% of our employment and about 92% of our employment and 90% of the number of businesses. But in terms of GDP, they are about 48.8% of our GDP. Now, our GDP is about now 500 billion. So you can now see about 250 billion of that money is coming from MSMEs. Now, if you are looking at a threshold of $1 million, 1 million naira for tax purposes and VAT purposes, take that as an average, multiply by the 40 million that are the small and micro. That gives you 40 trillion naira, $130 billion. Now, that is about half of that half. Now, can you imagine? Don't forget about the 25 million when we get there. Imagine in the next 4 or 5 years, that average moves from 1 million to 10 million. Do you understand what I'm getting at? Do you know the impact? We will now have a contribution to GDP of 400 trillion naira, which is about 1.2 trillion. Now I can see a pathway for Nigeria to actually arrive at this dream that by 2030, our GDP could be 1.64 trillion, and by 2050, it will be 6.4 trillion. So you can now see a pathway. So the question is this: how rapidly can we increase that average turnover? And then what are the conditions, binding constraints that we have to take off? Of course, we know the infrastructure. The more power that we can deliver, the quicker that they will rise to that level. So I can see a clear pathway. It was difficult to say this. So this finance bill has opened a lot of avenues. And also, it has consolidated most of the recommendations from the ease of doing business, which over the last 4 years, we've been having incremental progress. So much of the recommendations on how to handle it is being implemented and captured in the finance bill. So the greatest winner is not just the government, states and local government that are getting extra money to pay the salaries, but these people can earn their money, keep the money, and reinvest it, because the banks are not investing in the real sector. So they now have opportunity to grow the business. By the time it gets to 25 million, they can start a second business. By the time so that will have changed the equation in this country with this finance bill.
Okay. Tefa, you are very visible in the background report, so I'll come to you as much as you're just coming in. Ken, I know very well when the issue of eco-currency got heated up. You are the president of the National Association of Nigerian Traders, and you're also a trade lawyer. There was a huge memo you did to the president, ECOWAS, and what have you. With this 2019 Finance Act, what happens to your constituency? Is it good riddance, or is it going to nip you guys somewhere?
Thank you very much, me. Quite frankly speaking, the same day we met over this particular subject matter of ECO was the same day we met on the Financial Act. And I think if there is something to commend this administration for, this is one of the innovations. And we came to agree that although there's no law that does not have its perhaps little imperfections, this is a law, and therefore it can be amended, it can be improved upon with time. But for the president, I'm not holding brief, I mean, a jury is here to do that, but for the president to have that courage to get into this, I think kudos to him. Now, having said this, there are key issues that we looked at. One, the opportunity created by this act to increase the tax net. That's one. Two, is the opportunity to also remove and exempt the small and medium enterprises from such a heavy tax burden. That's number two. Number three is the consumer populace that has also have had their shoulders laden with numerous taxes and then the VAT, and at this time, consumables. A major chunk of food and consumables were also removed from the VAT. That's a great one. Number four is that it has also created an opportunity for revenue increase, so that, what we'll be having every year, you'll be having budget deficit. And then we are borrowing. And some people have been condemning the act of borrowing. The act of borrowing is because we're having shortfalls. But because we are increasing that latitude, that tax net now, we are therefore increasing also the revenue base. However, I think that there are a few dots that we need to look at. One, now that we are going to have more funds in our pockets as a government, as a people, are we going to reduce the borrowing so that there will be a reduction in the future encumbrances of the people? Yeah. That's number one. Number two, can we have a people, a society, call themselves a society, call them non-state actors, that will be able to IMAC, open their eyes and see this increase in the volume of revenue? How do we watch so that while President Buhari is there sitting over there, these funds are going into the hands of administrators? Can we monitor them? Number three, there are governors. A major chunk of this VAT will be going to the states. And permit me to say this, many of our governors, unfortunately, are emperors. Do we have people who are capable, civil society organizations, CBOs, who are capable at the state level there to monitor and to ensure that these funds in the hands of governors are heading towards development of the states, so that people will not be looking at the federal every time? Number 5, the local governments also have funds coming in. Can the emperor also release its grip on the local government administrations so that they can freely also develop from that angle? Because if you don't create that pyramid of development, we will go back to the... I think I should stop there.
Okay, Tefa, shortcuts. How rapidly? What happens to regulations like he has touched across the 3 tiers? What happens?
Okay, basically, I'll just pick up from where he stopped. Nigeria's fiscal system is like a pyramid. In terms of revenue sharing, we have the federal government at the bottom, the states at the middle, then the local government with the small triangle at the top. But in terms of potentials, where resource is concentrated, the local government actually at the bottom, next to the state, then the federal government at the top. Picking from where he stopped, in terms of regulation and ensuring equity in resource spread, we must, as a country, empower the people, the bottom of the pyramid, where the resource is concentrated, to be able to generate, to be independent enough to generate resources that will contribute to the center. The way it is right now is that the whole of the SDGs, for instance, will not be achieved if the local government is left out. But unfortunately, the local government that has the highest potential for internal generated revenue are all relying on states for handouts, and the states themselves on the federal government for the monthly allocation they get from Abuja. But if we empower the local government to ensure that they are able to generate, to boost their capacity for internally generated revenue, we will see that fiscal structure being rearranged. But if you take before I came for this program, I looked at the 36 states budget in terms of revenue, how much they generate from pay as you earn, from revenues from MDAs, from road taxes, other taxes. I realized from the chart that the pay as you earn, taxes from pay as you earn is about 56% for states. So Nigerian states are still civil service dependent. Taxes at the subnational level for Nigeria is still pay as you earn. It comes from those those with government jobs and the pay as you earn that they get from them. All these states, especially at the local government level, are relying on just handouts. Again, if you look at the federal level, we have the National Assembly to ensure that the legal framework that is needed to empower any reform of the federal government is put in place. At the level of the state, we have the state houses of assembly to ensure that they work with the state executive to provide the counterpart of what the federal government is doing. For instance, the ERGP for the federal government, the state will ensure that working in synergy with the state assemblies, there's an ERGP for the states, but we don't see the state replicating what the effort the federal government is putting to ensure that the country grows. The 10.59 trillion we have as federal government budget is just federal. To get federation budget, you have to add all the expenditure from the states. So the state needs to also sit up to complement what President Muhammadu Buhari and his team are doing up here in the center. Then at the local government level, there is local government council. They play the regulatory role of, let me say, National Assembly and State Assembly. But they have become like committee of people that the state governors just like. Borrowing from me again, having that posture of being emperors. So through fiscal restructuring, which I'm not defining it in a very complex manner, but in a simple manner of local government waking up to realize their power, the potential they have to contribute to growth, using the local government council to provide the needed framework, complementing what the state is doing through the state assemblies, and then what the center is doing through the National Assembly. This is the kind of regulation we hope to see that will drive this country to achieve that high growth that the president alone cannot achieve if the local government and state don't join. So regardless of party differences, there must be one in economic thinking. If you recall, during the time of National Economic Empowerment Development Strategies, there was seeds for states, state economic empowerment development strategy, and there was leads, local government economic empowerment development strategy. For the ERGP, where is it? Why don't we hear local government ERGP, state ERGP, just like we have at the federal government? So the federal government right now, with the henchman being President Muhammadu Buhari, is running optimum, is running very fast, but with the kind of load, developmental load behind him, IDPs, refugees, insecurity, job creation, growing population, the effort will not be commensurate if the states don't join in pushing. So it's really important now that we're in this 2020, long-awaited 2020. The states and the local government need to join hands with the center.
Before I allow the SSC to respond, let me take two issues now on Ken Ife and Ken Okoha. Now, Professor Ken Ife, I see the issue of market forces mechanism here playing out in terms of behavioral mechanisms, trade, and the consumer behavior. If we don't watch it, can it alter it? In terms of, for instance, given what is on ground now, could there be, in terms of consumer behavior change, the trader behavior change?
Okay.
How do we manage that?
Now, we do need consumer credit explosion, so that people will stop having to pay cash for everything. It's a cash economy. You want to buy a house, you bring cash. You buy a car, you bring cash. If we have credit, then we can use hire purchase, we can use leasing, and then, we can get with 10%, drop 10%, you drive off a car, 3 years, you bring it back and bring it, so, something like that. But second perspective to your question is when you look at GDP, you can have primary sectors, agriculture, industries, and services. But there's another way of looking at GDP by composition. Now, you look at household consumption is about 84% of GDP. Now, investment is the next one. Government consumption is only about 5%, 5.7%. Then the investment is less than 10%. Now, the household consumption is critical. Because the problem we have two problems. If money flows to the market, capital flows to them, it's best for people to borrow from the market. That is the best way to borrow. But what happens is that when you go to the market, the people who get the money are the traders, and they use it to import. And that's why you find the likes of central bank reluctant to lower the interest rate, because it will just be hijacked by traders and they start importing. And then what does that do to inflation? Then, it doesn't actually go into production. Okay. Because if it goes into production, then everybody will be laughing. Because the flow of funds going into production means that, because it needs to tie it to household consumption, which is about 84% of the consumption. Whereas on the other side, the weakest link in our economy is the link between agriculture and industries. Agriculture is 22%, industry is 22%, and the service industry is 56%. Now, because of the weak link between agriculture, primary agriculture, and industry, what we grow is not being processed. So what happens is that what we grow as crops flow out through our borders. And when it is leaving, it's causing inflation, because you have demand pull inflation. And the reason it's going is because our currency has dropped. If 1 naira used to buy for 3 francs, now it's buying 1.5. So our food are cheaper. But 3 months after that, in dry season like February, March, those same food grain that we left here, 50,000 naira per ton, soya beans, rice, all that, they will come back at 150,000 naira per ton, 300% increase over a period of 3 or 4 months. So, and it becomes imported inflation. It becomes a cost push inflation. So on both counts, the food, you look at the inflation, Core inflation is always less than 10%. It's about 8.6 to 8.8% for a long time. And the urban inflation and rural inflation, they are all around 10%. But the food sub-basket index is 13.78 going up. So that's what is pushing the inflation, keeping it up. Do you get the connection? Yeah. So, the disconnect is just the fact that our raw material, 30 to 70% of what we produce never make it into the food chain because of post-harvest losses. If we are processing them, we will deal with the issue of border transferring our jobs being there, and then we're also dealing with the problem of containing inflation. So in both counts, the traders are not that helpful in that respect.
To him.
They're not that helpful.
Before I allow the SSC to react.
When I was in the board of one of the microfinance banks, of course, I was beginning to look at what is going on at the microfinance level. And I looked at what is they are lending at 3% a month, but who are they lending to? They're lending to traders. Because only traders who can pay 3% a month, which is 36% a year, because they use it to import and buy, and they buy and sell. Manufacturers can't borrow that kind of money. So we have that, it's something that we have to sort out with Ken. And
yeah, that's what I'm going to him now. Ken, now with what you activated a direction in this whole discourse, and now coming back to you, what are you doing to conscientize your platform so that they are properly carried along on all this, to avoid the fears Professor Ken Ife has raised?
I think that fear is already allayed. I mean, it's already reduced, so to speak, by this particular act. And I'm going to tell you how. And that's one of the reasons why we say that this act is quite innovative. In her own wisdom, the presidency looked at this and removed VAT from agro-business, agro-food, if you like. Okay? What would that do? Of course, that would go a step further to reducing food import bill of the nation. You know why? Because there's going to be more investments in that sector now. Because people are no longer going to pay more taxes. And of course, if you look at the nature of SMEs, they want to go to where they are not going to be, just so much. And don't forget, the three necessities of man, essentials: food, housing, and clothing and shelter. Now, if on food, you have reduced the burden of tax, and even before now, Nigeria is moving towards self-sufficiency in some commodities, essentially rice. We'll come to that. It means that capital flight, as regards that particular component, that sector, that particular value chain, has dropped. So the government is now raking such funds into the system again and motivating the private sector to invest more in that particular sector. Again, one other thing is that, for some time now, we have started this subject of campaign on made in Nigeria goods. And before that time, the problems with dollars, the exchange rate problem, at a point, created a bigger one for traders. They were not seeing dollars to buy. And even when they see the dollars to buy, it was so high. Therefore, when you look at how much you are going to buy and how much you're going to buy dollar, and then go fly to Dubai and fly to to Europe, fly to the Asian tigers to import, you are dissuaded already. So people looked back to local substitutes. And because of that, we had that system of, getting back more investments in the local economy. So that fear of our funds going out again Absolutely. Even with the closure of the border, people are adapting to it. So I think these are things that are working together. The policies are gradually, it may be unwitting, but gradually they are all coming together to process a nation that we want. Whether they are palatable at this time or not is another thing. But ultimately, all of these things are going in the right direction. And don't be afraid. The traders want something that will exchange and get them more funds into their pocket.
Thank you very much.
It is not.
Now, federating units, competitiveness between the public and private sector. Are we going to reduce borrowing? I'll take that to Ajuri. But quickly, what should the youths be doing? They cry so much about jobs. What's the space for the youths before the SSA will respond?
Okay, in the context of what the current administration is doing, especially this Finance Act that is out now, what this Finance Act does is to make it very clear that principally through taxes, VAT, value-added tax, personal income tax, capital gains tax, company income tax, and also some palliatives for small and medium-scale enterprises, there will be opportunities that will be opened up. What macroeconomics does is not to directly attempt to create jobs, but to provide a conducive environment for people with ideas, those who have some level of innovation, to take advantage of, to see what they can gain from the system. So in the context of ICT, infotech, youths with the smartphones, with all the Twitter and Instagram, need to see how they can buy into the investment space that the Nigerian economy is opening up through the digital economy. Then secondly, this current administration is not just allowing job creation to be determined by market forces, what economists like to call invisible hands. They're also making deliberate efforts to ensure that they provide jobs through the social investment program, through the Empower and through many other schemes. So youth must first of all know what government is doing. Youth must be interested in government program. There are a lot of windows out there, even from the central bank, that youth, if organized, can have access to credit to invest in. But many youth today don't really follow up with what government is doing. And I won't blame them. The National Orientation Agency have to package government information about businesses, access to finance and credit, and take it to where these youths are, which is the social media space. Package this information in a way that they can access it and take advantage of it. That's for youth. That's just it.
Okay. Huge bag of concerns raised. Can you handle them?
Thank you very much. I think first and foremost, obviously, it comes down to an appreciation of the fact that we are a country that is faced with decades worth of deficits. I mean, that's the reality. We can't run from it. It's not an APC or PDP issue. This is a Nigerian issue. This is the reality we have. Now, digging out of that and implementing long-term solutions that are going to be able to not just dig us out of it, but also ensure that we never go back to those deficits is something that does not happen overnight. And the nice thing is that in our consultations with the Nigerian people across radio, social media, etc., they're very clear-eyed about this. They're very realistic about this, and they're very cooperative about this. What they just want is to have an open door and an ear, to ensure that they're being heard and that their contributions actually have a tangible impact on government action. And that is something that we're committed to doing, and we have been doing that certainly in recent months in particular. Now, I think it's important for us to look tangibly at we talk about restructuring. And during the last election campaign cycle, there were so many different definitions given to the notion of restructuring that nobody really understood what restructuring really was in the end of the day. What Mr. President has done, though, is he has taken tangible steps toward actual restructuring, particularly in the fiscal space, that I think Nigerians have seen and commended. First and foremost, I would mention, obviously, the implementation of the new Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit, NFIU guidelines, which have now ensured that for the first time in decades, that local governments are receiving the funds that are due to them direct from the Federation account, bypassing the state governors. This is something that is verifiable. This is something that we are now on a monthly basis putting those allocations online so that every Nigerian will be able to see exactly what his or her local government is earning on a monthly basis. These are the things that will give our people the tools to be able to hold public administrators to account at all levels, which is what is required if we're talking about youth employment, if we're talking about building infrastructure at all levels, if we're talking about some of the economic restructuring that all of us desire as a country. So we have started the process, and we just ask our people to please be patient with us and to monitor the progress we're making and ensure that that progress is sustained and ensure that whatever we are promising, that we are held to account for those promises across sectors. I think our people are showing a zest in doing that, and we're going to continue to engage with them. So I think ultimately there's no secret sauce, there's no magic wand. The first thing we have to do, we have to diversify our economy away from oil and gas. We have started that process in a major way by obviously ramping up agricultural production, for example, bringing down our food imports, getting really close now to meeting local demand so that we can now export and all of that and really rejig the ratio between oil and gas exports and the exports of other commodities. We're on the path of doing that. Now, the second leg is ensuring that we build the infrastructure, right? Even if it's with borrowed money. There is smart borrowing. We are borrowing intelligently. We are borrowing for infrastructure. We put that infrastructure in the ground. Guess what happens? Cost of production goes down. The cost of producing energy, the cost of logistics, you name it, all the costs go down. That encourages investments. That brings in the factories that employ our people. Once you've employed your people, now you're looking at expanding the tax base, and now all of a sudden you have a sustainable, developing economy that's not dependent on the vicissitudes of a global oil price. So these are the things that are going on right now, and I think Nigerians are looking around the country and they can see tangibly new airports coming on stream, new seaports that are being constructed, both dry and wet. They're seeing new roadways being constructed. They're seeing all of these things going on, new bridges and all of that. So all of this is happening. Nigerians are seeing it. We're just asking our people to be patient with us and to continue to hold us to account.
I must say thank you, gentlemen. It has been a loaded night, starting with Ajurin Galale, Senior Special Assistant to the President on Public Affairs. It was nice having you on the program.
Thank you for having me.
And I reserve you the best for the better. Happy New Year.
God bless you and Happy New Year to you and to all Nigerians.
Tefa Abraham, investment and financial expert. Thanks for being on the program.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
Professor Ken Ife, lead consultant on private sector development of the ECOWAS Commission. It was nice having you.
Thank you for inviting me.
Ken Okoa, very strategic to the last topic. Thanks for the program, for being on the program.
Thank you so much.
And to our viewers, those who put in their calls, those who sent in their tweets, thanks so much, and forgive me if I didn't take your tweet tonight. That's it on Tuesday Live tonight. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.